As promised, it's time for an in-depth conversation about the style of play of the Edmonton Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your interim host, Nick Zararis, here to hold it down for the duration of the Oilers playoff run. Today's episode of Locked On Oilers is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends, download Monopoly Go now on the App Store or Google Play. So, on yesterday's show, we kind of set the tone, did the elevator pitch, gave you an idea about how I approach hockey stylistically, mentally, how I analyze it. Today, and I had mentioned that we were going to do a dive. We were going to do a statistical deep dive and better understanding how the Oilers play and what about how they play makes them effective. So, on today's episode, we're going to tackle just that, how the Oilers play and what about it has enabled them to be so successful this season. We're going to attack it from an offensive approach, a defensive approach, and then our third segment of today's show, we are going to talk about how their specific style, the Oilers, applies to the playoffs, how teams with a similar style of play have typically fared, the limitations and the strengths and weaknesses of said style within the confines of playoff hockey. So, jumping right on into it and talking about the Oilers' offense. Offense is the key to today's NHL. Across the board, scoring is up in the major sports. There is a unanimous consensus amongst the stakeholders, the owners, the commissioners, the highest people in power, that the viewing audience, us, we want offense because offense is exciting. Offense allows you to play fantasy. It allows you to bet on games. And defense is not as exciting. And it is not a coincidence that scoring is up across the board in hockey, especially. The three highest seasons in goal scoring across the board are the last three seasons of full NHL hockey. This year, 2023-2024, and there's still a handful of games to go that are going to be played Thursday night, the night of this recording. Third most ever goals in a season. Last year was the most goals ever scored in a season, and the year before that, the second most goals ever scored in a single season. Part of what's driving the uptick in offense is an increase in power play opportunities. Power play opportunities have steadily increased for the better part of the last decade, 15 years, coming out of that dead puck era. And when I refer to the dead puck era, I'm talking about 2005 on. So after the lockout, the NHL understood that fans wanted offense, that to facilitate excitement, you wanted to incentivize high skill, speed, and talented players. You know, they came out of that lockout with Crosby and Ovechkin and Malkin and Joe Thornton and genuine bona fide stars who played the game at an extremely high level. And to facilitate that, to enable them to play offense at an exciting and entrancing way, like that, entrancing, good SAT word if you're still in high school. To play that way, you can't be grabbing guys. You can't be interfering. You can't be doing what defense was prior to the officiating overhaul of the last 10 to 15 years. So with goal scoring up and that as the backdrop for the league, you got to understand the ideal game state. With offense being up across the board, across the entire league, that means teams are more likely to concede when they are playing defense. The ideal game state is to play only offense. Of course, we all know you're not going to play only offense for 60 minutes. That's just not doable. You would have to be playing the worst hockey team of all time. But that's the ideal outcome. You want to play as much offense as possible to facilitate the creation of scoring chances, and you want to play as little defense as possible to concede as few scoring chances as possible. And we're going to talk about how the Oilers' defensive style makes them successful in the second segment for the purposes of offense. The Oilers are not a straightforward rush or a straightforward forechecking team. Those are the two main styles that exist in today's NHL. If you're a rush offense, you're typically going to have your forwards flying your defensive zone early, trying to receive long stretch passes to create odd man rushes, to get the defense off balance, and most importantly, to drive the net and then pursue that cross seam pass, the one circle to the other, catching the goalie moving laterally. That is the most efficient and most dangerous scoring chance you can create in today's NHL. That cross seam pass from left to right or right to left in the offensive zone that makes the goalie move from post to post, that is the single most converted scoring chance in today's NHL because it is bankable. If the goalie is moving, that means a portion of the net is going to be open, and the goalie has to respect the shooter and they have to respect the pass, especially if you get that odd man rush. In theory, the defender that's back is supposed to play the pass and the goaltender is supposed to play the shot. In theory, that way, if the defender takes away the pass, all the goalie has to worry about is the shot. But being that humans are fallible, that isn't always what happens. So in a vacuum, those are your best chances, the cross seam left to right. We also know that's not the only way to create offense. And building off of that, when you have the luxury of talent like the Oilers do, when you have a McDavid, a Draisaitl, a Nugent-Hopkins, a Zach Hyman, and a Vander Kane when he's healthy and playing up to his ability, when you have flashes of a good player in Dylan Holloway, the Oilers have plenty of talent. Hell, we can even throw Adam Henrique in there for the purposes of this conversation. When you have guys that have puck skills like that are able to make plays where not everybody can do that, that's going to open stuff up. You keep and you unpack that a layer further. That type of dynamic ability, and we're talking about dynamicism as a talent. We're talking about McDavid and Draisaitl and Evan Bouchard, but we're only talking about offense right now. Those guys are capable of making plays that mortal humans are not. We talk about we talk about Connor McDavid's ability to enter the zone with control of the puck and speed. He's the best player in the world at that skill, and it has such a trickle-down effect on offense that it is almost impossible to account for the other players on the ice because you have to respect his talent. The other luxury the Oilers have is the fact that they can choose to play Draisaitl and McDavid together, or they can separate them. And this stat kind of crazy to me. The Oilers have played a little over about 3980, 3990 of minutes. They've almost played 4,000 minutes this season at even strength. Of those 4,000 minutes, 2,022 of them have had at least one of McDavid or Draisaitl on the ice. Some of that is when they're on together, but at least one, more than half of the minutes at 5-on-5. Now, I'm not going to litigate this into a Hart Trophy discussion or best player in the world conversation. We know Connor McDavid is the best player in the world. We know Nathan McKinnon is probably going to win the Hart Trophy this year. But there's maybe 3 teams, 4 teams in the entire world that have a 1-2 as good as McDavid and Draisaitl. So that alone puts you in rarefied air as the Oilers. And to segue nicely into our next segment, we are going to take a break before that, but to set the tone, to segue in there nicely, it's important to understand that part of why the Oilers offense has been so strong this year, so efficient offensively, is the fact that they don't play a lot of defense, that they don't let the other team in, they get out quick, and we're going to talk about all of that coming up next. We've all been there as a player, as a fan. It's halftime, it's intermission, the scoreboard's not looking so hot. You're feeling low, not sure how your team can pull out a win. That's when you got to dig deep and make something happen. Time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love on your phone, anytime, with tons of twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. There are so many dynamic boards. You can make friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. You can charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. Get back out there, put on your game face, download Monopoly Go. It's free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. And I want to thank everybody who's hanging out on this Thursday evening for the latest edition of Locked On Oilers, where we got your team covered every single day. Defense is complicated to explain, especially in hockey, where it is inherently reactionary and it is dependent on the other team. It's not conceptually the same as in basketball or as in football, where you are trying to manipulate the other team into doing something. Because hockey is so free-flowing and it's so individual decision-based within the confines of a structure, it's always going to be difficult to discern what makes for good defense. There are a few different ways. In an ideal world, you would have defensemen who are adept at preventing the other team from getting to offense at all. That, in my mind, is what the modern day defensive defenseman looks like. You know, Matthias Ekholm is very good at this. Jacob Slavin of the Carolina Hurricanes is very good at this. Charlie McAvoy of the Boston Bruins is very good at this, at in the neutral zone, breaking up the play before it can even start. The other team's not going to be able to create scoring chances if they can't get to the offensive zone. If you consistently force the other team to dump the puck in to get past you in the neutral zone over the course of a game, that's going to more often than not help you, because those rush chances, you know, we were just talking about it in regards to the Oilers, how they like to go from defense to offense quickly. If you force the other team to dump the puck in, you've effectively forced them to commit a turnover. I know dump and chase isn't going to go down in the book, you know, in the stat book as a turnover, but that team just spent, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, a minute in their own zone, did all the work to get the puck back, got out of their own zone, and crossed the red line of center ice, only to have to lose control of the puck again. They just did all of that work to get control, and they lost it. That's not to say there isn't a role. You know, if a team is playing a high line in the neutral zone, the only way to break through is to dump the puck past them, go get it, and go to work. You know, dump and chase has a role in today's league, but the most efficient offenses are the ones that don't have to do that, because it's adding an extra step to the process of creating offense. So in regards to the Oilers defense, a few good stats for you. Number one, opposition opponents gain the offensive zone against the Oilers the least per 60 of any team in the entire NHL. That tells you, A, the Oilers are forcing the other team to dump the puck in, and B, it's telling you the Oilers are on offense a lot. And that inherently is the best defense in today's NHL. Remember what we were talking about in the opening segment about how offense is up, scoring chances are up, power plays are up, save percentage is down, all of those things. If you don't let the other team into your zone to begin with to shoot on your net, they can't create scoring chances. You're less likely to take a penalty on that when you have the puck in the offensive zone than in the defensive zone. So with that in mind, you can start to get an understanding of why the Oilers have been so successful and why some of their metrics are as insane as they are under the hood. The Oilers retrieve the puck in their own zone at a high rate, and they don't turn the puck over in their own zone. They are really strong at recovering the puck and getting out of there. Part of what makes them so successful in that is that they are an organized breakout group. Their forwards come back. You know, we were talking about before about rush offenses typically being long stretch passes, trying to bypass large swaths of the ice with those long passes. If you watch the Red Wings at any point in the last few weeks as they were trying to frantically make up playoff positioning and ultimately got eliminated. But if you watch the Red Wings at any point in the last few weeks, you saw Patrick Kane hovering at his own blue line, hoping a defenseman would recover the puck and get it to him so he could go on he can try and create a rush chance going the other way, because he knows he's not particularly good defensively. He's not going to win puck battles. He's not going to forecheck. But if he gets the puck in space, He can use his hands to create opportunities for both himself and his line mates. The Oilers don't do that. The Oilers forwards are very good about coming back, getting the puck, and then building up speed to skate through. And it's going to always be difficult to discern out how good a team is at a given component of the game when you have the best player in the world. A lot of the Oilers' woes can be solved with something as simple as, okay, let's get the puck to McDavid. If you're familiar with the Will Ferrell movie Kicking and Screaming, Get It to the Italians, same exact principle here. McDavid is going to be able to bob and weave through traffic at an extremely high level. If you give him the puck in his own zone and you give him room to build up speed, and then he can serpentine through the other team, that's where he becomes supernatural, where he shows why he's the best player in the world. And you've got this all connected. So not only do other teams not get to the zone with possession a lot, when they do, the Oilers don't give them second chances in their own zone. The forwards are coming back. They're engaged in the defensive zone. It's helping you win the numbers battle there. Strong neutral zone play is the key to today's NHL. That means forcing the other team to dump the puck in. It means your forwards building up speed and not forcing lateral passes into the other team's coverage. It means north, either you're skating the puck into the other team's zone or you're dumping the puck in and then going to get it. Those are the keys to today's game. And too many teams, they get lost in the weeds. They force that one extra pass laterally as opposed to continuing forward. They try and skate through the other team's defense as opposed to dumping it in when the situation calls for it. Now, part of the reason the Oilers have gone on this nuclear run, I talked about it on yesterday's show. If they played at the pace they've played at since they hired Chris Knobloch as their coach, they would have finished the season with 118 standings points. That would have been 4 points clear of the Rangers, who won the President's Trophy this season. Part of the reason they've been able to supernova the emergence of one Evan Bouchard, somebody I've been extremely high on for a long time, and it's really good to see him put all of the components of his game together. So, when you have a defenseman like a Bouchard, like a Miro Heiskanen, a Cale Makar, a Quinn Hughes, an Adam Fox, a Charlie McAvoy, a Brandon Montour, when you have one of those upper echelon offensive defensemen, a lot of teams struggle when that guy's not on the ice because their forwards get so used to playing with a puck driver on the back end that when they play with mortal defensemen, they're not as good offensively. The key here, not only is Evan Bouchard great, they've got one of the best defensive defensemen in the entire league in Matthias Ekholm as a compliment. Ekholm, long one of the more underrated players in the league because he doesn't put up counting stats. The Oilers have played 1,200 minutes at 5-on-5 with Ekholm and Bouchard on the ice together. In those 1,200 minutes, the Oilers have outscored opponents 78-45. When those two are not on the ice, the Oilers have outscored opponents 89-87. Not only is that one of the best splits of any first pair in the entire league, it's a testament to what you can do when you can diversify where you're putting guys. If the Oilers are chasing, if they're down a goal in the playoffs, and we're about to start talking about how this all applies to the playoffs after the next break, you're in the playoffs, you're down a goal late. The Oilers can throw at you maybe the best 1 through 5 in the entire league, whether they want to go McDavid, Hyman, Draisaitl, Bouchard, Ekholm, if they want to swap Ekholm out and get Nuge out there, if they want to pull the goalie and they get Nuge out there with those. The options when you are down a goal for this Oilers team they're flat out stupid. And when you have a defensive pair like Bouchard and Ekholm, that no matter who they play with, whether it's with McDavid, with Draisaitl, or if it's with the bottom 6 guys, if it's with Dylan Holloway and Corey Perry, they're going to help those guys play offense better too. In an ideal world, you separate your first pair from your best forwards and you can tilt the ice for half the game, because your first pair is probably going to play 25-ish, 26 minutes, at least to start in the playoffs. Your first line is probably going to play about 19, 20 minutes. If they're separate, That's 40 minutes of the game. That's 2/3 of the game where you're going to be able to control the game state. That's the type of advantage you want if you're going to go on a deep playoff run. Speaking of the playoffs, coming up next, we're going to talk about how this applies there. One of the most important responsibilities you can have as somebody in a family with kids, with a partner, is taking care of life insurance. It is an important safety net for your family, and trying to find the right policy can be frankly overwhelming. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you compare options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts are there every step of the way to talk you through it. Talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through it every single step. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, or even worse, it may not come with you if you switch careers. Policygenius gives you unbiased advice from licensed experts in the industry. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. Thank you, everyone who is here for the third segment of the second episode of the return of Locked On Oilers. I am ecstatic to be here. The Oilers are one of the most exciting teams in the entire league, and I'm grateful to be here, in all honesty. So, we've talked about offense, we've talked about defense. Goaltending is its own conversation, but goaltending doesn't inherently have a style within the mechanics of the game. Every individual goalie has their own unique style, but for the purposes of this conversation, we've established the Oilers are a high-skill team that doesn't play a lot of defense, that's really strong at sustaining offensive zone time and forcing the other team into creating mistakes. So, applying that to the playoffs. Historically, teams that are primarily rush-based offenses do not fare as well in the postseason as teams that are strong at cycling the puck and forechecking. Why is that? There's not one specific reason. It's a few things. Number one, teams that rely on rush offense are typically more talented. They're higher skill. We're talking about high individual talents like McDavid. You talk about the Oilers, you talk about the Leafs, the Canucks, the Rangers, the Golden Knights, the Avalanche. Those are high-end teams with genuinely elite players who are capable of controlling the game by themselves. Where those teams get into trouble is when they become too reliant on a handful of guys to do a bulk of the heavy lifting. It's not that they're drowning in the minutes those guys aren't on the ice, but when they're not on the ice, they're treading water. And if those high-end players aren't capable of swinging the game on their own, that increases the difficulty of trying to score. If you're relying on one line or two lines to do all your scoring at 5-on-5, it's going to make it a lot more difficult the deeper you get into the playoffs, because when you get deeper into the playoffs, the other team's going to have close enough star talent. If the Oilers are playing the Avalanche or the Stars or the Jets or the Canucks or the Golden Knights, any of those teams has enough talent where they will not be able to entirely cancel out that Oilers top six, but they will be able to make 90% of the production of the Oilers top six. And then it comes a battle of depth. And in an ideal world, you have a diversity of style throughout your lineup. Part of what made the Lightning so successful, part of why they were able to go back-to-back, was the fact they featured a bottom six that was capable of sustaining offensive zone time and putting pressure on the other team. They didn't need to score a ton. They weren't asking Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman, Yanni Gourde, Ross Colton, Pat Maroon. They weren't asking those guys to contribute a bunch of goals. But they did keep the other team in their own zone 30 seconds, 40 seconds, a minute and a half. You sustain long periods of offensive zone time from guys who aren't your elite, who aren't expected to drive the bus. You force the other team to play more defense, which is more tiring. You force the other team into situations where they're more likely to take penalties. And then your big guns get the numbers advantage on the power play, and you can really take advantage of the situation at hand. Part of what makes it difficult is you want your star players to drive the boat. They're going to take the heaviest responsibility in the playoffs. They're going to play more minutes. As the playoffs go along, you're going to start to see defensemen creep up towards that 30-minute mark. You're going to see forwards creeping up towards that 25-minute mark. But what do you do in the minutes those guys aren't out there? For the Oilers to go where they want to go this year, they are going to need to find that next component, if you will. They are going to need to be comfortable with playing prolonged dump and chase, forecheck type of games, because that's what other teams are going to do to slow down the Oilers. How do you slow down a team with as much speed as the Oilers? You dump the puck in, you force the Oilers defensemen to turn their backs, whether it's Darnell Nurse, CC, Bouchard, whomsoever, Ekholm, whomever, you force them to turn around. You are still skating full speed. You put pressure on them below their own goal line. You get your guys set up in the offensive zone, and then you can start to dissect them. No team is as good at playing defense as they are at playing offense. Playing offense is being in control of the game. That would be like saying, how do you control the game as a hitter when the other team's pitching? You can't. The pitcher is the one who puts the ball into play. We're dealing with the same type of circumstance here. For the purposes of this conversation, you're going to want to play as much offense as possible and as little defense as possible. How do you facilitate that? Well, we've talked about it a little bit. You skate the puck out of danger as opposed to passing it. You gain the zone with speed and allow your teammates to push the net so you can try and get the goalie moving left to right and set up that dangerous cross-seam pass. You marry that to strong individual talents, and then you can start to see, wow, the ceiling for this group, the ceiling for that group. For the purposes of this conversation, the Oilers have the talent. More often than not, teams that are very talented aren't able to make it happen because the game circumstances don't facilitate that talent. They don't make that player as good at what they're good at. A lot of conversation about individual players isn't rooted in what makes them successful. It's just that they're successful. It's just that they're a great talent. It's that they're a great skater, or they're a great playmaker, or a great shooter, or they have great positioning and they take away the other team's shooting lanes, and they are so good defensively that the other team can't get to offense. That's where we start to get into conversation. It's not just that this is so good. It's they are so good because Connor McDavid is so good because if he has the puck on his stick, he can create a zone entry for himself. His line mates can catch up. He can continue pressing the net while he waits for his line mates to catch up, and that creates multiple scoring chances every single time the Oilers gain the offensive zone when Connor McDavid is on the ice. That is what makes Connor McDavid great. For the Oilers to apply their craft to the playoffs this year, the path will not be easy. We talked about it yesterday. Whether it's Vegas, whether it's the Kings, both of those teams have enough talent, especially defensively, that the Oilers are going to have to be okay with making the simple play, with dumping it in, going to get it, and trying to force them into mistakes as opposed to trying to create off the rush, because that's where you're going to get picked apart. When you make mistakes off the rush, that's going to set up a second rush opportunity going back the other way. If you have a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2, that means you only got 2 back, and the other team has that extra person who's supposed to be back up. I do think that will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. Leave the show a 5-star review. If you are watching on YouTube, that's my face. Yeah, my eyes are a little watery. I had to pause to cough. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Like the video. Let me know why you think the Oilers have taken a step from where they've been in years past. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.